On January 23rd, 1950, along West 147th Street in Harlem, Frank Costello abducted Bumpy Johnson's brother, presenting him with only 13 minutes to hand over control of Harlem. There were no threats uttered, no voices raised, just time slipping away, second by second. This wasn't driven by vengeance or wounded pride. This was calculated strategy playing out against a ticking clock. So how did a single man venture into Little Italy by himself and emerge with his brother still breathing? To grasp how things reached this point, we need to return to where it all started, to that initial phone call. January 23rd, 1950, West 147th Street, Harlem. The kind of Tuesday evening where the frigid air cuts straight through brick and stone, where the sidewalks empty themselves before nightfall and the sole sound comes from wind clawing at fire escapes, like nails scraping down glass. Bumpy Johnson sits inside his apartment on the third floor, a corner unit with windows facing two directions, allowing him to spot danger approaching from any side. He pours himself 2 fingers of cognac, French variety, the expensive kind, the sort that creates a clean burn as it slides down your throat. The record player comes alive. Duke Ellington begins drifting through the space like smoke, unhurried and intentional, winding itself around the furniture. This represents his ritual. Tuesday evenings are reserved exclusively for him. No gatherings, no money collections, no business dealings. Just cognac and music and the fantasy that someone like him can live like an ordinary person for a handful of hours. The telephone begins ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. It continues ringing, persistent, insistent, slicing through Ellington's music like a blade through silk. Bumpy places his glass down, moves toward the phone, picks up the receiver. Yeah, the voice coming through belongs to Sarah Gordon. She's weeping. Not the quiet, contained type of crying, but the loud, frantic kind that emerges when someone's entire world has just shattered. They took him. They took Illinois. They said if you don't arrive at Mulberry Street before 9 o'clock, they're going to kill him. Bumpy doesn't ask who's responsible. He doesn't need to. Only one organization in New York possesses either the boldness or the foolishness required to snatch his brother from his own territory. The music continues playing, but Bumpy no longer hears it. He glances at the clock mounted on the wall. 8:47. 13 minutes. Where on Mulberry? The club. The one with the red awning. They said, "Come alone or he dies," they said. Her voice dissolves into sobbing. Bumpy ends the call without offering a goodbye. He remains there momentarily, hand still resting on the receiver, observing the second hand advancing forward. The room falls silent now, except for his breathing and the unforgiving progression of time. Illinois, Gordon isn't simply a bodyguard. He isn't merely muscle. He's family. This man absorbed a bullet intended for Bumpy back in 1947, extracted him from an ambush in 1948 when 3 of Luciano's soldiers attempted to put him in the earth. You don't abandon family, not for anything, not for an entire kingdom. Frank Costello. The name materializes in Bumpy's thoughts like frost forming on a window. They refer to him as the Prime Minister of the underworld, a man who doesn't require firearms because he owns half the politicians throughout New York, because law enforcement answers to him, because he controls the unions and the docks and every mechanism of power that carries weight. Costello doesn't execute impulsive actions. Everything he does gets calculated, engineered to trap you before you even recognize you're caught. This isn't rage driving him. This is strategy. And Bumpy recognizes it. He picks up the phone again, dials a number he knows by heart. 3 rings. Then someone answers. Marcus, the man who coordinates soldiers, who knows every rooftop throughout Harlem, every alleyway, every window offering a clear line of sight. Illinois is gone. Costello has him. Mulberry Street. At the club with the red awning. I need 12 men. Quiet positioning on every angle. Don't move until I signal you. How much time we got? Bumpy checks the clock. 8:49. 11 minutes to reach there. But we're not storming in like a bunch of idiots. This isn't about speed. This is about control. You going in alone? That's what they want. So that's what they're getting. But I want eyes covering every window, every door, every person who thinks they can exit that building without my permission. What's the signal? You'll recognize it when you see it. Just don't shoot unless I'm already shooting. And Marcus, if this goes sideways, if they kill me inside there, you burn that entire block to the ground. You understand? I understand. Bumpy hangs up, walks into his bedroom, opens the closet. The smell of aged wool and mothballs drifts outward, mixing with the faint scent of cognac still sitting on the table. He removes a gray suit, white shirt, no necktie. The .45 goes into the shoulder holster concealed beneath the jacket. He inspects the magazine. 7 rounds, sufficient to send a message if circumstances demand it. On the shelf behind a stack of hats sits a bottle of Barolo from 1934, half consumed, dusty, waiting for an evening that holds significance. Bumpy looks at it for an extended moment. Tonight will carry a price. He doesn't know what form it will take yet, but he can sense it the way you sense approaching rain. He'd been anticipating this. Not tonight specifically, not Illinois, but something. For 3 days running, his instincts have been warning him that Little Italy is preparing to execute a move. So he prepared as well. A plan constructed in 3 layers, each one designed to transform Costello's trap into a cage, insurance purchased and secured with favors and promises and photographs that certain men would commit murder to keep hidden. Bumpy fastens his jacket, checks the gun one final time, walks toward the door. The clock displays 8:56. 4 minutes to cross into hostile territory. 4 minutes to determine whether he enters Frank Costello's domain as someone begging or as someone commanding. He steps into the hallway, closes the door behind himself. The music from his apartment still plays, faint now, drifting out into the cold night atmosphere. Down on the street, his car waits. Black Cadillac, engine running, Willie positioned behind the wheel. Willie is young, perhaps 25, with a scar cutting across his left eyebrow and hands that remain steady even when firearms are aimed at his face. They really took Illinois? Yeah. What the hell does Costello want? Everything. Harlem, the numbers racket, the protection operations, all of it. He's been attempting to buy me out for 6 months now. He's trying to frighten me out. Willie's jaw clenches. You want me coming in with you? No, you stay with the car, keep the engine running. If I come out with Illinois, we leave quickly. If I don't emerge in 20 minutes, you drive back to Harlem and you tell Marcus to do what I instructed him to do. Which is what? Burn it all down. Willie nods. He doesn't argue. He knows better. Bumpy climbs into the rear seat and the Cadillac pulls away from the curb, heading south toward Little Italy, toward Mulberry Street, toward a club with a red awning, where his brother waits to discover if loyalty still holds meaning in this world. The streets blur past. Tenements, storefronts, alleyways, everything familiar, everything marked with invisible boundaries that separate one territory from another. Bumpy watches it all go by, his face like carved stone, his mind running through scenarios, probabilities, potential outcomes. Costello wants him desperate. Costello wants him to walk in pleading, ready to trade Harlem for Illinois' life. And perhaps a weaker man would, perhaps a smarter man would. But Bumpy Johnson didn't construct an empire by being weak or conventionally smart. He built it by being willing to lose everything before surrendering 1 single inch of what belonged to him. The car slows down. Mulberry Street, the heart of Little Italy. The buildings here are older, positioned closer together, the type of narrow streets where sound echoes and every window conceals watching eyes. The club sits on the corner, red awning stretched over the entrance, light spilling outward onto the sidewalk. Bumpy checks his watch. 8:59. 1 minute remaining. He looks at Willie. 20 minutes. Not 1 second more. Good luck, boss. Bumpy steps out of the car. The cold strikes him immediately, cutting through his suit like it's made of paper. He walks toward the club, each step measured, deliberate, a man who has decided that fear represents a luxury he cannot afford. The door opens before he reaches it. A man in a black suit, thick neck, dead eyes. He doesn't speak, just steps aside. Bumpy walks past him into the heat and smoke and noise of Frank Costello's territory. 8:59. The countdown has started. Frank Costello doesn't kidnap people for ransom money. He doesn't take hostages because he needs cash or because he's angry. Costello takes what you love and forces you to choose between what you require to survive and what makes survival worthwhile. He's a businessman. And tonight, Illinois Gordon represents leverage, pure and simple. For 6 months, Costello has been attempting to acquire Harlem. First, he arrived with money, offering Bumpy a partnership that would have made him wealthy and completely powerless. Bumpy told him to go to hell. Then Costello tried muscle, dispatching his boys to shake down the numbers runners, to rough up the bookies, to remind everyone that Little Italy possesses more firearms and more men. Bumpy broke their fingers one by one and sent them back in pieces. Then Costello tried politics, leaning on City Hall, getting the police to raid Bumpy's clubs every other evening, making business expensive and conspicuous. Bumpy paid the fines and kept the doors open. Now Costello is trying family, and that's the dirtiest play of all. The trap is perfect. If Bumpy goes to Mulberry Street alone, Costello puts a bullet in his head and takes Harlem without resistance. If Bumpy brings his army, it starts a war that will burn through both neighborhoods and provide the other families an excuse to carve up everything. Either way, Costello wins. Either way, Bumpy loses. But Bumpy Johnson didn't survive 15 years in this business by walking into traps blindly. He built insurance, 3 layers of it, and tonight he's cashing in every single policy. Step 1, secure the rear. Bumpy picks up the phone, dials Sarah's number. She answers on the first ring, her voice still shaking from crying. "Sarah, quiet down and listen to me. You lock every door, every window. You don't open for anyone except me or Illinois. I don't care if it's the police. I don't care if it's Jesus Christ himself. You keep that door shut. What if they come back? What if? They won't. I'm sending 2 men to watch your building, 1 on each corner. Anyone attempts to get close, they'll put them down. You understand me? Yes. Good. Now stop crying and lock those doors." He hangs up before she can argue, calls another number. Jimmy picks up on the second ring. Bumpy provides him the address, tells him to take Clarence, tells them to stay invisible but prepared. Anyone comes near Sarah's building, you break their legs first and ask questions later. No one takes Illinois' wife tonight. No one gets that card to play. Step 2, surround Mulberry. Bumpy dials Marcus again, provides him the complete plan. 12 men, 4 on the rooftops across from the club, clean sight lines through the windows. 4 in the alleys on either side covering the exits. 4 on the street dressed like civilians watching the front. Don't fire unless you see broken glass. That's the signal. You see windows breaking, you light that place up like the 4th of July. You don't aim for Costello, you aim for everyone else. You make it so loud and messy that he has to negotiate or die trying. And if they kill you before you break the glass, then you burn the whole block, every building, every car, every single thing Costello owns in Little Italy. You make it so expensive that the other families question whether he's worth protecting. You make them remember that touching Bumpy Johnson costs more than it's worth. Marcus is silent for a moment. Then he says, "You're betting your life that Costello won't just shoot you the second you walk in. I'm betting that Costello is too intelligent to start a war over 1 bullet. He wants Harlem. He doesn't want a bloodbath that brings the commission down on all of us. But if I'm wrong, Marcus, if that man kills me, you make sure he pays for it. You hear me?" "I hear you." "Good. Now get your boys in position. And Marcus, tell them if they mess this up. If they fire 1 shot before I give the signal, I'll come back from the dead and beat them to death myself." Step 3, walk into the wolf's den and force him off balance. Bumpy checks himself in the mirror. Gray suit, white shirt, no necktie. The .45 sits in the shoulder holster, loaded, safety off. He looks like a man attending his own funeral, and perhaps he is. But if tonight concludes with him in the ground, it won't be because he begged. It won't be because he bent. It will be because Frank Costello learned that some men cannot be bought, cannot be scared, cannot be broken. He walks out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the January cold that bites through his suit like teeth through skin. The Cadillac idles at the curb, Willie behind the wheel, engine running, ready to move. Mulberry Street. The club with the red awning. Willie doesn't ask questions. He just drives. The streets slide past, dark and empty, the kind of quiet that arrives before violence. Bumpy watches the buildings go by, his mind already 3 moves ahead, already visualizing the room he's about to walk into, already calculating angles and exits and who will die first if this goes to hell. Before they left Harlem, Bumpy gave Marcus the final order, the contingency, the line in the sand that cannot be crossed without consequences that shake the entire city. If I don't walk out of that club in 20 minutes, you don't wait, you don't hesitate. You turn Little Italy into a graveyard. You burn it until there's nothing left but ash and bodies. You make them understand that this isn't business anymore. This is war. Now, sitting in the back of the Cadillac, Bumpy can almost smell it. The smoke rising from burning buildings, the cordite from 100 guns firing at once, the fear that will ripple through every family in New York when they realize that Bumpy Johnson would rather watch the city burn than surrender 1 inch of what he built. Marcus stands on a rooftop 2 blocks from Mulberry Street, the wind cutting through his coat like razors. He can smell the sewers, the garbage, the rot that hides beneath every city like a secret. January wind screams through the narrow streets, high and sharp, like something dying. He checks his watch. 8:58. 2 minutes until Bumpy walks through that door. 2 minutes until this entire thing either concludes cleanly or explodes into something none of them can control. Marcus lights a cigarette, takes a drag, watches the street below. His men are in position, rifles loaded, fingers on triggers, waiting for broken glass or 20 minutes, whichever arrives first. The Cadillac stops half a block from the club. Bumpy checks his watch. 8:59. 1 minute. He looks at Willie one final time. 20 minutes. If I'm not out, you drive away and you don't look back. You go straight to Marcus and you tell him to do what I told him to do. What if they follow me? Then you drive fast and you hope they're bad shots. Willie nods, his hands tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white. Bumpy steps out into the cold. The club sits on the corner, red awning glowing under the streetlights, warm light spilling onto the sidewalk like something alive. Music drifts out, muffled by the walls, a slow jazz number that sounds like a funeral march. Bumpy walks toward the door. Each step measured, deliberate, the walk of a man who has accepted that the next 20 minutes will decide whether he lives or dies, whether Harlem remains his or becomes another piece of Frank Costello's empire. The door opens before he reaches it. A man in a black suit, thick through the shoulders, face like a brick wall, eyes like a shark. He doesn't speak, just steps aside, one hand inside his jacket where a gun waits. Bumpy walks past him into the heat and smoke and noise. The door closes behind him with a sound like a coffin lid dropping. 8:59. 60 seconds to cross the line. 60 seconds to discover if insurance is worth the price you pay for it. The club smells like cigars and old wood and something darker, something that has soaked into the walls over years of men making deals that end in graves. Dark mahogany panels line the room, polished to a shine that reflects the dim lights overhead. A long bar runs the length of one wall. Bottles stacked like soldiers waiting for orders. Men in suits sit at tables, still as statues, their eyes tracking Bumpy from the moment he walks in. Frank Costello sits at the back, beneath a painting of the Italian countryside, all rolling hills and vineyards, and a sky that never existed anywhere real. A glass of red wine sits in front of him, half empty, catching the light like a ruby. He doesn't stand when Bumpy enters. He doesn't smile. He just watches, his face carved from the same wood as the walls. Illinois Gordon is tied to a chair 3 feet from Costello's table. His face is a mess. Left eye swollen shut, purple and black spreading across the socket like spilled ink. His lip is split, still wet, crimson dried on his chin. His shirt is torn, buttons missing, revealing bruises across his ribs where fists and maybe boots have done their work. But his eyes, the one that still opens, finds Bumpy immediately. "Don't give these people what they want," Illinois says, his voice thick, slurred from the beating. One of Costello's men backhands him across the mouth. The sound echoes in the quiet room like a whip crack. Illinois spits onto the floor, then looks back at Bumpy, defiant, even with a gun pressed against the back of his skull. Costello picks up his wine, takes a slow sip, sets it down with deliberate care. "Bumpy, thank you for coming. I was worried you might be stupid enough to bring an army. I'm here. Let him go." "Let him go?" Costello laughs, a dry sound without humor. "You think you walk in here and make demands? You think that's how this works? You wanted to talk, so talk." Costello leans back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "I want 50% of everything in Harlem. The numbers, the protection, the clubs, all of it. And I want your political connections, your police contacts, everything you've built. In return, I let you keep breathing and I let Illinois here go home to his wife. And if I say no?" Costello nods to the man with the gun. The hammer pulls back with a metallic click that fills the room. "Then you watch your brother die, and then you die, and then I take Harlem anyway. Your choice." Bumpy doesn't flinch. He doesn't look at the gun. He looks at Costello, his face empty of everything except calculation. "Frank, you made a mistake tonight. Is that right?" Bumpy reaches into his jacket. Every gun in the room comes out, hammers cocking, barrels swinging toward him. Bumpy moves slowly, deliberately, pulling out not a weapon, but a photograph. He sets it on the table in front of Costello. The photograph shows a boy, maybe 8 years old, wearing a Yankees cap too big for his head, eating an ice cream cone outside a shop in the Bronx. The timestamp in the corner reads today's date, 3:15 in the afternoon. The angle is from across the street, telephoto lens, professional. The kind of surveillance photograph that tells you someone is watching, someone is close, someone knows where to find what you love. Costello picks up the photograph. His hand doesn't shake, but something changes in his eyes, something cold sliding behind the calculation. "You're threatening my grandson? I'm showing you a photograph, that's all. You touch that boy, I will." "You'll what, Frank?" "You'll kill me. You're already planning to do that. You'll kill Illinois, same thing. You'll come after Harlem. You've been trying for 6 months. Bumpy leans forward, his voice dropping. "I'm not touching your grandson. I'm not going near him. But I wanted you to know that I could. I wanted you to understand what it feels like when someone takes what you love and uses it as leverage." Costello's jaw tightens. His fingers crush the photograph, crumpling it into a ball. "You son of—" "Yeah, I am. But so are you. And now we both have something the other one wants. So maybe we should talk like men instead of playing these stupid games." The room goes silent. Every man in the club is watching, waiting to see which way this breaks. Costello stares at Bumpy, and Bumpy stares back, neither one blinking, neither one giving an inch. Bumpy pulls out his watch, sets it on the table between them. 9:07. "You have until 10 o'clock. "Until what?" "Until my people burn this whole neighborhood to the ground. I told them if I'm not out in 20 minutes, they start with this building, and they don't stop until Little Italy is ash." Costello's face goes red. "You're bluffing." "Maybe. But are you willing to bet your grandson on it?" Illinois, still tied to the chair, blood running down his chin, lets out a sound that might be a laugh. "He's full of it, Frank. No one touches kids. That's the line." Bumpy doesn't look at Illinois. He keeps his eyes on Costello. "That's right. That's the line. But you know what? You already crossed a line tonight when you took my brother. So now we're both standing on the other side of the rules, trying to figure out who's willing to go further." The room is silent as a chapel now. Not the warm silence of prayer, but the cold silence of held breath, of men waiting for violence to arrive or pass them by. Outside, the wind howls through Mulberry Street, cutting between buildings like something looking for a way in. Costello looks at the photograph crumpled in his hand, then at Illinois, then at Bumpy. His mind is working, calculating odds, weighing costs, trying to find a move that doesn't end with something precious burning. And for the first time tonight, Frank Costello understands that he's not the only one willing to play dirty. Costello stares at the crumpled photograph in his hand for 10 seconds that feel like 10 years. Then he looks up at the man holding the gun to Illinois' head. Cut him loose. The room doesn't move. Every man at every table sits frozen, waiting to see if Costello means it, if he's really going to let Bumpy walk out of here with his leverage intact and nothing to show for it. I said, cut him loose. The man with the gun hesitates. His name is Carmine Battaglia, 32 years old, hungry for respect, hungry for a name that means something in Little Italy. He's been waiting for a moment like this, a chance to prove he's more than just muscle, more than just another body with a gun. And now Costello is asking him to let it go, to untie the hostage and watch Bumpy Johnson walk out like he owns the place. Carmine doesn't move. His finger stays on the trigger. His eyes flick from Costello to Bumpy and back again, trying to read the room, trying to figure out if cutting Illinois loose makes him look weak or smart. Carmine, Costello says, his voice harder now, I'm not asking twice. Boss, if we let him go, everyone's going to think we back down. Everyone's going to think Little Italy is soft. I don't care what they think. Cut him loose. But Carmine is already thinking 3 moves ahead. If he unties Illinois, if he lets Bumpy walk, the other soldiers will whisper. They'll say Carmine folded under pressure. They'll say he didn't have the courage to finish what they started. And in this world, reputation is everything. Weakness gets you buried, so Carmine makes a choice, the wrong choice, the kind of choice that turns negotiations into massacres. Illinois stands, hands still tied behind his back, trying to find his balance after hours in the chair. He takes 1 step toward Bumpy, then another. And that's when Carmine pulls the trigger. The gunshot is so loud in the closed room that it feels like the walls are caving in. Illinois jerks forward, his body twisting, a wet hole opening in his back just below the left shoulder blade. He stumbles, falls to one knee, crimson spreading across his torn shirt like spilled wine. Bumpy's hand moves before his brain catches up. The .45 comes out of the shoulder holster smooth and fast, the barrel rising, finding Carmine's chest, the trigger pulling back. The first shot hits Carmine in the sternum, punching through bone and lung, spinning him backward into the wall. The second shot takes him in the throat as he's falling, opening his neck like a second mouth, spraying the dark mahogany paneling with red mist. Carmine hits the floor and doesn't get up. The room erupts. Guns come out at every table. Men dive for cover. Costello drops behind his table, wine glass shattering on the floor, the Barolo mixing with everything else. Bumpy grabs Illinois by the collar, drags him behind the bar, wood splintering above their heads as bullets chew through the polished surface. Marcus! Bumpy doesn't shout it. He roars it. And then he grabs a bottle of whiskey and hurls it through the front window. The glass explodes outward, shards catching streetlight as they fall, the sound carrying down Mulberry Street like a signal flare. And Marcus hears it. 2 blocks away, standing on a rooftop with a rifle in his hands, he hears the window break, and he gives the order. 12 men move at once. 4 from the rooftops, firing through the second-floor windows, not aiming for Costello, but for everyone else, turning the upper level into a shooting gallery. 4 from the alleys, kicking in the side doors, shotguns booming in the narrow hallways. 4 from the street, rushing the front entrance, pistols out, laying down covering fire that turns the club's entrance into a storm of lead and broken wood. Inside, the world is chaos. Men scream, furniture explodes. The smell of gunpowder mixes with spilled liquor, sharp and chemical, burning the throat. Bumpy stays low behind the bar, one hand on Illinois, keeping him down, keeping him alive. His other hand holds the .45, waiting for a target. "Don't shoot Costello," Bumpy yells over the noise. "Anyone else, but not him. Because this isn't about killing Frank Costello. This is about teaching him a lesson. This is about showing him that threatening family has a cost, that taking hostages has consequences, that some lines exist for a reason." The gunfire lasts 90 seconds. 90 seconds of hell compressed into splinters and smoke and men dying in suits they'll be buried in. When it stops, the silence is so sudden, it feels like the world has ended. Bumpy looks down at Illinois. His brother is on his back, breathing in short gasps, one hand pressed against the wound in his shoulder. The fabric of his shirt is soaked through, dark and wet, spreading across his chest like a shadow. "How bad?" Bumpy asks. Illinois tries to smile. It comes out wrong, more grimace than grin. "I've had worse. Tell Sarah." Illinois' voice catches, breaks. "Tell her I love her." "Shut up. You're going to tell her yourself." But Illinois' breathing is getting shallower, faster, the kind of rhythm that means the body is losing its fight. His eyes start to drift, focus slipping away like water through fingers. Bumpy grabs his face, forces him to look up. "You don't get to die in this hole. You hear me? You don't get to leave Sarah alone. You stay." Marcus appears in the doorway. 3 men behind him, rifles still smoking. "We need to move now." Bumpy lifts Illinois, one arm under his shoulders, dragging him toward the door. Outside, the Cadillac is waiting, Willie behind the wheel, engine running. They pile in, Illinois across the back seat, his breathing wet and labored. Hospital, Harlem Hospital, and drive like hell. The car pulls away from the curb, tires screaming on wet pavement. Behind them, the club sits gutted and smoking, bodies on the floor. Costello somewhere inside, still breathing, still calculating, still understanding that tonight the rules changed and he was on the wrong side of the change. Bumpy presses his hand against Illinois' wound, trying to slow the flow, trying to buy time. Illinois looks up at him, eyes barely open. "Did we win?" Bumpy doesn't answer right away. He looks at his brother, at the life draining out of him, at the price of keeping Harlem free. Winning doesn't mean anything if you don't come home. 3 hours later, after the surgeons have pulled the bullet from Illinois' back and stitched him together and told Sarah that her husband will live but needs rest and prayer in equal measure, Bumpy gets a phone call. The voice on the other end is Frank Costello, tired, older than it was this morning. "We need to talk. We already talked. Not like this. Face to face. Just you and me. No guns. No—" Bumpy hangs up, thinks for 30 seconds, then calls Marcus. "Set up a meet. Neutral ground. That diner on Canal Street. 1 hour." The diner is empty when Bumpy arrives. Just a waitress wiping down tables and a cook in the back frying something that smells like old grease and desperation. Costello sits in a corner booth. No bodyguards, no backup, just an old man in an expensive suit that can't hide how much tonight has aged him. His face looks like it's been carved with a dull knife, lines deeper, eyes sunken, the kind of wear that comes from watching your world crack and not being able to stop it. Bumpy slides into the booth across from him. Neither man speaks for a long moment. The waitress brings coffee. Neither of them ordered it. It sits between them, steaming, untouched. "Did you really take my grandson?" Costello asks, his voice flat, empty of threat. Bumpy reaches into his jacket. Costello doesn't flinch, doesn't move, just watches as Bumpy pulls out a second photograph and sets it on the table. This one shows the same boy, same Yankees cap, but the timestamp reads 9:15 tonight. The boy is at home, sitting on a living room floor, playing with toy soldiers while his mother reads a book on the couch behind him. The angle is from outside the window, far enough back that whoever took the picture was never close enough to be a danger. Costello picks up the photograph with hands that shake just slightly. "He was home all night." "Yeah. You never touched him." "No." Costello sets the photograph down, his fingers smoothing the creases like he can erase what tonight has done to him. "Then what was the point?" "The point," Bumpy says, leaning forward, "was to make you feel what I felt when you took Illinois. The point was to make you understand what it's like when someone puts a gun to the head of someone you love and tells you to choose between them and everything else you've built. So this was a lesson. This was a mirror, Frank. I held it up and I made you look at yourself. I made you see what kind of man uses family as leverage. And now you know. Now you understand that if you cross that line, if you go after the people I love, I'll go after the people you love. Not because I want to, because you'll leave me no other choice. Costello's jaw tightens. His hands curl into fists on the table. You could have just killed me tonight. You had me. You had the upper hand. Why did you let me walk? Because killing you starts a war I don't need. Because the commission would come down on both of us, and Harlem would burn along with Little Italy. And because I wanted you to understand something more important than fear, which is what? That I didn't touch your grandson. I could have. I had people watching him all day. I had opportunities. But I didn't take them because there are lines, Frank. Lines that separate men like us from animals. And I'm not crossing that line. Not for Harlem, not for anything. The words hang in the air between them like smoke. Costello stares at Bumpy, trying to see the angle, trying to find the trick, the hidden blade waiting to slide between his ribs. But there's no trick. This is Bumpy Johnson showing him the one thing more dangerous than violence: principle. So what happens now? Costello asks. Now, you make me a promise. You stay out of Harlem. You don't send your boys to shake down my operations. You don't lean on City Hall to mess with my business. You don't touch Illinois or Sarah or anyone else in my family. You leave Harlem alone. And if I don't? Bumpy pulls out a third photograph. This one shows Costello's grandson again, but it's different. It shows the route the boy takes to school every morning, the park where he plays every afternoon, the grocery store where his mother shops every Thursday. It's a map of vulnerability laid out in black and white, impossible to ignore. Then I won't kill the boy, Bumpy says, his voice quiet, cold. But I'll make sure you spend every day for the rest of your life wondering if today is the day I change my mind. I'll make sure you never sleep easy again. I'll make sure every time that kid walks out the door, you wonder if he's coming back. Costello looks at the photograph for a long time. Then he looks up at Bumpy, and something in his face has shifted. Something is broken and can't be put back together. You're a ruthless man. Yeah, but I'm a ruthless man with rules, and that makes me different from you. Costello picks up his coffee, takes a sip, sets it down. The cup rattles against the saucer, his hands not quite steady. Harlem is yours. I won't send anyone in. I won't touch your family. I won't interfere with your business. Swear it. I swear it. Bumpy shakes his head. Your word doesn't mean anything to me, Frank, but your fear does. Your fear is worth something, because now you know what I'm capable of. And more importantly, you know what I'm not capable of. You know I have lines I won't cross, and that makes me predictable. And predictable is something you can work with. He stands, drops a $5 bill on the table for the coffee, neither of them finished. Stay out of Harlem. Stay away from my family. Do that, and we never have to see each other again. Costello doesn't respond. He just sits there, staring at the photographs spread across the table, at the evidence of how close he came to losing something he can't replace. Bumpy walks out of the diner into the January cold that bites through his suit like teeth. Outside, Mulberry Street is quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after violence has passed through and left its mark. The streetlights flicker, weak and uncertain, casting shadows that seem to pull away from Bumpy as he walks past. Little Italy feels smaller tonight, diminished, like it's lost something it will never get back. And maybe it has. Maybe tonight Frank Costello learned that there are men in this world who can't be bought, can't be scared, can't be broken. Men who will burn everything they've built before they surrender 1 inch of what belongs to them. Bumpy gets into the Cadillac. Willie is behind the wheel, waiting. Where to, boss? Hospital. I want to check on Illinois. The car pulls away from the curb, heading north, back toward Harlem, back toward home. Behind them, the lights of Little Italy tremble in the cold night air, shaking like they know something has changed, like they understand that the balance of power just shifted and there's nothing they can do to shift it back. Illinois Gordon survives. The bullet missed his spine by 3 centimeters, close enough to feel like a miracle, far enough to be called luck. He spends 2 weeks in Harlem Hospital, Sarah at his bedside every day, holding his hand while the doctors change bandages and check for infection. By March, he's back on the streets, moving slower, favoring his left side, but alive and breathing, and still loyal to the man who dragged him out of that club. Carmine Battaglia doesn't survive. He dies on the floor of Costello's club, 2 bullets in his body, his ambition leaking out onto the mahogany floor along with everything else. They bury him 3 days later in a cemetery in Queens. A small service, no speeches, just his mother crying and his brother standing silent in cheap suits. Nobody from Little Italy talks about him after that. His name becomes a warning, a cautionary tale about what happens when you break your boss's orders and pull a trigger you were told to keep holstered. 4 of Costello's men die that night. 3 more end up in hospitals with wounds that will mark them for life. But Frank Costello doesn't retaliate. He doesn't send soldiers into Harlem looking for revenge. He doesn't call the commission to settle the score. He just absorbs the loss, buries his dead, and keeps his mouth shut. Because Bumpy touched the one thing Costello couldn't afford to lose, and Costello knows that if he pushes back, if he tries to even the ledger, Bumpy will push harder. And next time it might not be a photograph. Next time it might be something that can't be undone. Word spreads through the 5 families like fire through dry wood. Bumpy Johnson went into Little Italy alone and walked out with his brother. Bumpy Johnson faced down Frank Costello and made him blink. Bumpy Johnson drew a line and dared the most powerful man in New York to cross it. And when that man tried, Bumpy burned his soldiers and left him sitting in the ashes. Costello keeps his promise. He never sends another man into Harlem. He never leans on City Hall to interfere with Bumpy's operations. He never touches Illinois or Sarah or anyone else in Bumpy's circle. Harlem stays independent, a kingdom unto itself, protected not by walls or guns, but by the understanding that some men can't be bought and can't be broken. In 1957, 7 years after that January night, an assassin walks into the lobby of Costello's apartment building and puts a bullet in his head. Costello survives, barely, the round grazing his skull and leaving him with headaches that never quite go away. After that, he steps back from the life, retires to his estate, lets younger men fight over the scraps of his empire. A reporter asks him once, years later, why he never went back for Harlem, why he let Bumpy Johnson keep what was arguably the most profitable territory in New York. Costello just smiles, that tired smile of a man who has learned expensive lessons. I met a man who couldn't be pushed. You don't fight men like that. You just stay out of their way. When Bumpy Johnson dies in 1968, the funeral draws thousands. Politicians, businessmen, street soldiers, people who owe him money, and people who owe him their lives. And among the wreaths and flowers that pile up outside the church, there's one arrangement that stands out. Expensive, tasteful, white roses arranged in a perfect circle. The card reads simply, "Respect, no name, no signature, but everyone knows who sent it. Carlo Gambino, one of the 5 families, a man who understands that some debts are paid in acknowledgement, not apologies." Late on the night of January 23rd, 1950, after the hospitals and the meetings and the arrangements have all been made, Bumpy Johnson stands alone in his apartment on West 147th Street. The same apartment he left hours ago when the phone rang and Sarah's voice told him his world was about to change. He pours himself 2 fingers of cognac, puts Duke Ellington back on the record player. But this time the music doesn't sound the same. This time it's not a ritual of normalcy, not an attempt to pretend he's ordinary. This time it's a reminder, a memorial to the man he was before tonight and the man he had to become to survive it. The city sleeps outside his window, Harlem dark and quiet, unaware of how close it came to burning. Bumpy lights a cigarette, watches the smoke curl toward the ceiling, thinks about Illinois in a hospital bed and Carmine in the ground and Frank Costello sitting in his club surrounded by bodies and broken glass, learning the hardest lesson of his life. Real power doesn't come from violence. It comes from knowing when to use violence and when to hold it back. It comes from understanding the lines you won't cross, even when crossing them would be easier, even when crossing them would win you everything, because power without limits is just chaos, and chaos burns out fast. The question isn't what you can take. The question is what you're willing to sacrifice to keep your principles intact. Harlem is not for sale, and after that night, everyone knows it. Everyone understands that there are some traps you can't set for a man who would rather die standing than live on his knees. There are some men you can't corner, can't scare, can't break, because they've already decided that losing everything is better than giving up 1 inch of what they built. Bumpy finishes his cognac, turns off the music, walks to the window and looks out at his kingdom, at the streets that belong to him, not because he took them, but because he refused to let anyone take them away. The new order has been established, not with treaties or contracts, but with blood and fear and the cold understanding that Frank Costello just learned what happens when you push a man who has nothing left to lose except his dignity. And dignity, it turns out, is the one thing worth dying for. This story is shared for historical insight and personal reflection, not to promote violence or illegal behavior. Thank you for watching until the end. These stories take weeks of research and writing to create. If this resonated with you, if you see the lesson Bumpy Johnson was teaching about accountability and education over violence, hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 1 million subscribers so we can keep telling stories that matter. Stories about power used wisely. Stories about consequences faced honestly. Stories about men who chose to change systems instead of just destroying enemies. Next video drops soon. Until then, remember, real power isn't what you can destroy.